Everybody hear me okay? Fine, okay. Anyway, well, thank you very much for having me. It's nice to be here and presenting. I'm going to provide kind of a high-level overview, a little bit of detailed data on where VR in healthcare has been since late 2019 into the heart of the pandemic, and kind of what we've been seeing the last 18, 24 months post-pandemic. Just really briefly, a little bit of background on me. I spent 20 plus years as a system and sales engineer, both some large and small companies, and had a dream job for 10 years working for a large conservation nonprofit for 10 years. And most of my work has had a large international component. In 2009, a little bit by happenstance, I organized what turned out to be the first social media conference on the East Coast. And it led to a number of conferences that year. And then in 2011, I did what nobody should ever do in this room, and that is launch a print magazine about social media. But those were the reactions I got from investors. But actually, 3 weeks after we debuted it at an internet conference in New York, we got national distribution with Barnes & Noble, and had global distribution in 20 countries after 4 months. We got named one of the 15 House magazine launches of 2011, and a lot of great magazine review praise. Only time I raised any angel investment money is a very small amount from former CEO of Time Inc. back in 2012. And the short version, it was a 2-month marriage and a 3-year divorce. But it was the worst experience for a first-time entrepreneur you can imagine. In 2015-16, shortly after the Oculus Kickstarter came out, people were reaching out and asking me what's the intersection between social media and VR. And I'm a longtime video gamer. I always kind of kept an eye on VR from that standpoint. And I started experimenting, doing some different one-off events in different verticals and just trying to see where the interest was. The first VR healthcare event we did 7 years ago now was a mild success compared to the others. With the help of Walter Greenleaf, we did a follow-up at Harvard Medical School a year later. And so that led into starting IVRA and just focusing on healthcare as a market opportunity in VR. It seems like, I think after gaming, entertainment, healthcare is definitely near the top of investment opportunities and where the interest is. Training is a large subcomponent within healthcare, so there's some overlap between training nurses, practitioners, and training in a general enterprise market. We launched with 40 founding members back in 2019, and now we're at about 120 members, and our 5th birthday will be next March. So building the VR healthcare market, everything I don't come from traditional healthcare background. Everything I've learned has been on the job and through experience and discussion and learning how hard it is to sell into healthcare. And when I look at it, and from my perspective, it's a long journey. And I think VR in healthcare market is a long journey. And I think we're looking at a 5, 10, 15-year endeavor before we kind of see it entrenched in part of every day. That has nothing to do with VR or the technology or the equipment. That has to do with healthcare and just the size of the market and how slow that it moves. So an important reality, I've been slowly lowering this number down starting from 99 a few years ago, and I feel comfortable saying that 90% of healthcare community isn't familiar with VR or really understands it. And healthcare makes up 20% of the US economy. I don't know what that relates to in Europe. I don't know if it's about the same size or not, but that's 1 in every 5 job positions in the US is healthcare related. It's a large amount of ground to cover, and it's just going to take a lot of time and effort to educate that market and all those people. So is that 5 years, 10 years, 15? I don't know. But what we've been seeing, and we've been seeing this for a while now, not just for VR, but every type of medical service device is being reinvented in a digital manner. Some are taking longer than others. Electronic health records are still not as common as we would like it, especially in the US, but it's getting there. And everything just takes longer than you would expect when it comes to healthcare. And we're working off of 30 plus years of research. There's a lot of good data, there's a lot of good studies, and plenty of efficacy and demonstration of what some of the great applications are, whether it's pain management, using VR for treating PTSD or traumatic issues. It's plenty of data. And it's spanning the entire area of healthcare. Every single area of healthcare you can think of, someone is working on a VR or AR application of it. Now, whether that makes sense or not is a different discussion, but there is a lot of innovation going on, and people are trying to see, where does it make sense? And until you implement and get it into a pilot phase, you really don't know whether it's going to make sense or not. I found this slide just the other day as updating this, and this is really great because I think it gives a sense of where we are going with this over the next 5 or 10 years. We're in this phase 1 right now. Phase 2, hospital digital twins. There's already early efforts of VR clinical trials going on, and companies just focused on supporting that as an industry and network. And then, and we're seeing early stages of robotic surgery and how VR and XR will play into that. But I think this is a great summation slide of the space as a whole. So the pandemic was good for some things. It was good for digital medicine. It was good for telemedicine, and it was good for VR and AR. And it was good for the adoption of digital technology in healthcare in general. Unfortunately, the comparison I always think about when looking at the pandemic, and I hope this isn't the case for other applications and technologies, but it took a pandemic for the majority of the population to discover video conferencing. I'm sure many of you in this room have been doing video conferencing for 15, 20 years, but for some reason, the majority of the population thought Zoom was new and a new innovation for planet Earth. We saw some significant investments in 2020 during the pandemic. XR Health is one of those. We're going to touch on them in a second with a recent acquisition they made. Limbix, Magic Leap. I'm not even going to comment on Magic Leap, though I'd be curious to hear what people think about Magic Leap today and if they're long for this world or not. I don't know how they burned through so much money so quickly. Immertech, they're actually, this company's a little bit under the radar anymore. They're still in existence, but they were focused on compression for VR technology over large networks. They were based out of Florida. Vicarious Surgical, and also VR, probably the behemoth in the space in terms of raising money, awareness, and reach at the moment. We saw a huge increase in investment in 21 over 2020 as we were just slowly coming out of that pandemic. And a lot of CIOs, CTOs at hospitals have been taking this quadruple aim approach on how to improve the hospital experience. And what are the main points that everyone's trying to focus on? Enhancing the patient experience, reducing costs, of course, improving health outcomes, and improving the clinician experience. Just talking on the patient experience for a second, we had a great speaker at our conference last year, Chief Customer Success Officer for EY. And she's trying to sell people and traditional healthcare on the idea that you need to think about the patient. Patients are customers. Unfortunately, they don't have as much choice when it comes to healthcare and where they can go for their service, but still it's a service. And those hospitals, companies that provide a better service, a better customer experience, one that maybe involves VR or not, will win more patients than others. And we're seeing those, I'll share one data point on this. Hoag Memorial Hospital in Newport, California, I think is probably one of the leading institutions in the US that's implementing VR and looking at all different areas. They've been doing, using surgical theater for almost 4 or 5 years now for doing brain, neurosurgery, taking out brain tumors. They've done a study now and they've demonstrated that 24% of the time they found a better pathway to the tumor by using VR than not having used it. So they are finding good uses for the technology. They're finding that they would not have found a better pathway otherwise. Now, where's it showing up in the bottom line? It's hard to correlate the investment that they've made in VR hardware and software, and is it improving their numbers when somebody comes in for surgery. Where it is showing up, though, is in their patient satisfaction records. Their satisfaction records have increased significantly. People are showing that they have a better experience. They enjoy, well, not enjoy, but they appreciate being shown and educated. How is their surgery going to go? It puts them more at ease. It makes them feel more comfortable. And when they're seeing those increased patient scores at a hospital-wide level, they are then slowly taking business away from Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, which is their main competitor. So that's where you're starting to see the ROI. You've got to look a little bit beyond the bottom line in terms of finances, and you have to look for other measurements and KPIs where satisfaction can be found and customers are having better experience. 21 saw investments continue. Applied VR, also a closely connected company with Cedars-Sinai. They've recently had a product approved by the FDA for treating chronic back pain. It's kind of slowly getting out in the market. This was a very small company, Realized Medical. Trip, I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. They're seeing more interest now from healthcare in the last year than before. Just heard this from their COO, and they're not quite sure. People just like the application and they see it used for mental health. I think they're trying to figure out how do they institutionalize that better, though, and demonstrate its efficacy. Also, VR just continued to raise money. Rendeavor is one of a handful of companies focused on senior care in the U.S. market. And Behave VR, had a huge deal with Sumitomo Pharmaceutical out of Japan. They made a very large long-term investment. And Applied VR did 2 rounds in calendar year 21. But 22 was a different story, and a decrease of 50% from the year before. Mainly, well, all directly tied to high economic uncertainty and directly correlated to the interest rate hike. I mean, if you look at the curve here, I wanted something a little bit flatter that showed it, but that is a really high asymptote to go from nothing to 5.5%. I know you guys are feeling it here in Europe as well, and it's still unclear how it's going to play out and impact everyone's finances and the economy as a whole. But I know the U.S. debt is climbing at an insane rate, and a lot of it is now going to servicing the debt at 5%. 22 was an okay year. XR Health, again, one of the larger companies raising more money. Also VR, another, I think this was their Series C. Fundamental VR out of the UK, one of the other leading companies for surgical training. Hapdex, great company. I think it's going to take them some time to miniaturize that product, but it does have some great opportunities. And Florio is based in Washington. They are focused on autism, treating autism, providing training. I'd say they're the leading company in that space right now. What's been great with Florio is they've been able to get reimbursement. So some of the insurance companies now are reimbursing for the use of Florio. They're getting adopted in school systems, and they've just made very good, steady progress. And then this year has been, I'd say, a little bit mixed. MetaView out of Cleveland, they were spun out of Cleveland Clinic a number of years ago. They're doing pretty well. I think this is an interesting confusion between augmetics and augmetics, but somebody will have a lawsuit one day. And Apocklar, which is out of Berlin. So we're starting to see a little consolidation. I'm not sure if this is being driven by opportunity or some companies maybe not having enough survivability. But BehaveVR acquired Oxford VR out of the UK earlier. I think it helps them extend their reach into Europe very easily and quickly. Oxford has some great technology, led there with Daniel Freeman, who's one of the leading researchers in the space. And earlier, I think in late spring, XR Health acquired Amelia Virtual Care out of Spain, though they had a large U.S. market. And I heard mixed things about the product from different people. I think some people liked it quite a lot. I've heard some people found it a little cartoonish in terms of the user interface and the characters, but I can't speak to that too much, except that all I can share is I heard mixed issues about it. I want to get close to ending here with the VA. Veterans Administration is, I think it is the largest healthcare system in the world in terms of number of patients that it treats. And they're doing more to push the limits of VR and AR in healthcare than any other organization in the world. This is the number of, they've gone from 0 to insane amount of deployments in less than just about 3 years. They are practicing and doing small pilots with a variety of different players, and seeing what works and what doesn't work. They're struggling like everybody else to operationalize this, and how do they get it into the daily clinical workflow? So I'm starting to run out of time. I'm going to, and this is a look of their expansion. They just had their second annual kind of internal conference last August, this past August in DC, and they announced and they made a commitment to purchase 10,000 new headsets during the next US fiscal year, which will start October 1. And I think that'll be a mix of manufacturer headsets, Pico, Meta, and so forth, HTC. We still have research gaps, though. I think where we need to get to from a clinical data standpoint is we need larger sample sizes. For the most part, most of the publications from the last 3-4 years have been in the anywhere from 10 population size to 20 or 30. I think if you want to start getting insurance companies interested and involved, we need to start getting to 100, 200, 300 population trials. Those are starting to get organized and starting to take place. But it's also important that if you're a VR startup company and if you don't have much of a healthcare background, or you don't have someone that's a physician that has worked in healthcare day to day, you've got to keep in mind, some of the concerns when trying to bring the product in. It's got to meet a high bar in terms to be adopted. It can't just be, it can be a nice product. It can provide value and add, but it's got to be cheaper. It's got to not add to the workflow, and it's got to be better than the existing tool that they're already using. We're just focused on education, education, education. We're doing our first, an idea we've had for a few years. We're doing a healthcare demo tour in 2 weeks. We're taking 12 startups, free VR healthcare demo in Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Columbus, one day after the other. Try to just educate as many people as we can, and see if that's a good use of time and energy. We have a book that came out in 21. It's not showing up picture. But 2-year project, it's 63 contributing authors and 35 case studies. This is our 8th annual conference coming up in Tampa next year. We would love to have you join us. We're going to have 2 days at Ringling School of Design, which is apparently the best graphics school in the world for computer animation, and 2 days at Moffitt Cancer Center. And then just wanted to mention Virtual Reality Day. This is an event I started back in 2017. It started as an in-person event. In 2018, it blew up, and very much, thanks to people in this audience, other people from Europe that organized local events. When the pandemic hit, we kind of really had to move it online. Altspace, may it rest in peace. But trying to get it back to in-person with events. It's a day of public education before the holidays, before people spend money. And again, it's putting people in headsets. Once somebody has a good VR experience, a lot of the rest can take care of itself, and their wheels start spinning. But it can't be Google Cardboard. It's got to be something that is quick, easy, and they see the value. And that's my contact information. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bob, for those interesting insights in how the market develops, where we see investments, where not. Are there any more questions from your side, Bob?
Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. I will try to be quick. I have two questions, actually. One is, your organization is international. However, I saw quite a strong focus on the US, so I'm wondering if you have some data about Europe, not even mentioning Asia and Africa. And the second question is about seeing the traction that is now finally coming. Aren't you maybe worried, or do you see this as an opportunity that there will be a kind of dependence of the US healthcare sector in a few hardware providers or software providers, kind of replicating the trends that we've been seeing in the past 20 years in more traditional sector?
Not sure if I caught the second part.
The second question is ending up being dependent of some companies that you just won't be able to work without. And we know how big of an industry the US healthcare sector is.
As for the association, actually it's about 70% is US and Canada and 30% Europe. And we have a couple stragglers here and there in South America and Australia. And then, again, if I'm understanding the second question, you're concerned about US companies becoming dominant?
No, I mean, I'm not concerned. I'm technology, so I love tech, but I'm aware about the social impact, and I'm maybe trying to be cautious about once the traction will be accelerating, the few providers of software and hardware will be occupying the market, and we know how tricky it will be afterwards to then make a fair competition work.
I think the assumption should be that it's going to be slow to go to market for any company, and some applications that maybe become a little bit more embedded, like surgical training, surgical planning. I would say that is probably a leading application, but still there's barely 5% of the hospital market in the US has been penetrated for surgical training in VR. There is a long way to go, and that's why I look at it as a 10, 15-year journey and not a 2 or 3 or 4 year journey.
Small question. You didn't mention Penumbra company, yes? Because they're doing Penumbra.
Penumbra? Yeah. Penumbra is one of our members, yeah.
Yes. They continue to do VR, yes? Or?
They are continuing to do VR. I think they've been struggling with how to sell it and getting it into the marketplace. They acquired it. They've gone through some turnover. I think they're in the process of kind of retrenching, trying to bring their salespeople up to speed. What I've noticed or what I found is that they did not provide enough training to their salespeople on the product, on how to demonstrate it, and if those salespeople are already selling other products, not just VR. So they're going to focus on what's easier to sell, and if VR is not it, well, it's going to be at the bottom.
Yeah, so thanks to speaker once again. Thanks, Bob.